I inherited Point Pine Oaks from my grandfather after my father wanted nothing to do with it. I, on the other hand, was broke and in need of a place to stay and a job, and well, beggars can't be choosers. So that's the answer to the question I get asked any time I'm out and about in the streets of our town. How on earth did you get stuck with that place? Everyone can see what Point Pine Oaks is, which is an apartment building that's 6 stories tall, with 12 apartments on each floor. Outside the building looks pretty normal, just a brick building at the end of Byers Street, which is a cul-de-sac that contains no other buildings on the street except for Point Pine Oaks. My grandfather bought the building in late 2013, which had been abandoned for over 3 decades, and the town was eager for someone to buy it. It became his passion project, and he fixed it up in January 2014. And the building soon became the biggest apartment building in all of Point Pine. Any resident of Point Pine knows that the Oaks are anything but normal, however. For starters, no one ever decides to move in. If people want an apartment, they have to go all the way to the opposite side of town where the apartment complex is. You see, people don't move into the Oaks. They just kind of appear. Every 13th of the month, a new apartment appears until each floor has 12 of them, and then the following year, a new floor appears to accommodate the next 12 apartments. Oh, and I suppose I should also mention, none of the residents are human, at least not normal living humans. My grandfather made it very clear to me that humans do not live in Point Pine Oaks, with the exception of the owner, which is now me. He never explained to me why humans are not allowed to live in the Oaks, and I never really questioned it because it just felt like the kind of rule that you follow without asking any questions. The entire first floor houses people who died outside of town. You see, anytime a prior resident of Point Pine dies, they wake up here again, in Point Pine. Usually, they are put in some secluded house up in the mountains, but for reasons unknown, they all ended up here at Point Pine Oaks in 2014. The second floor houses creatures with eyes that are too wide, teeth that are too sharp, and skin that is too green. They first appeared in Point Pine in 2015, and have been in charge of the farmers market since. They're relatively nice and tend to mind their own business, but that doesn't mean that they don't still freak me out every time I see them in the building with their incredibly long arms dragging the floor. The third floor is where the collectors live. The leader of the collectors is 10-year-old Mary Lou Birmingham. Mary Lou is the one who collects children's teeth. Of course, she doesn't take them right out of their mouths. That would be horrifying. She sneaks into their homes after their baby teeth fall out and takes them from under their pillows instead, like the Tooth Fairy. Most of the collectors are children, with the exception of Old Man Jones, who is an old man. Some of the children collect dead bugs, others collect less unsettling things like flowers, but some collect dirts from the graves in the cemetery. On the fourth floor live all the people who died in the 2017 when the bell tower appeared in Windsor Park. No one ever figured out what the deal was with the bell tower, but exactly 12 people died that year as soon as they saw it. Once the people of Point Pine picked up on the pattern, they stopped going to Windsor Park. Of course, after that, the bell tolled on the tower would just ring every month and still managed to kill more people. But that's a different story. On the fifth floor are the invisible vampires. But we don't need to talk about them. The sixth floor appeared this year, and so far the tenants of that floor were not of one specific species, and they don't seem to have anything in common. The first family to appear had no mouths and communicated by somehow talking inside my head. In February, one of the sacrifices from the Point Pine parade showed up. In March, it was a headless man. April brought a family of cucuys that almost gave me a heart attack the first time I saw them. They were by far the most horrifying residents of the building, with their huge red eyes that rattled around in their skulls and their decaying black skin that was crawling with maggots. Upon opening their mouths, the building shook with a horrifying screeching sound that was like nails on a chalkboard at 600% volume. In May, a seemingly normal family moved in, which terrified me just a bit more than the Kukuis had, until they invited me for dinner, and I watched their lower jaws drop to their shoulders as each one ate an entire raw chicken in one bite. June brought a demon, who would routinely set fires in the building, but other than that, it appeared to stay out of everyone's way. Last month brought the Wendigos, which were by far the hardest to deal with. We had to come up with an agreement that they would only eat the undead folks on the first floor, since they would just wake up in their apartments again the next day, and therefore they weren't technically hurting anybody. Today, the new apartment didn't appear until noon. This was odd, because they usually appear right at midnight on the 13th. I stood on the 6th floor, staring at the empty wall, until a door suddenly appeared. Apartment number 68. I took a few deep breaths to prepare myself for whatever hideous monster would answer the door, and then lifted my hand to knock. "Coming!" someone called from inside. I heard the footsteps approaching the door, and then the door opened in front of me. Hi. There was a woman standing in the apartment. She looked normal enough. Tall, blonde, with a tattoo of a rose on her left arm. Hi. I'm the owner of the building, the landlord. My name is Eric. I extended my hand out, bracing myself for some sort of heat, or coldness, or shock. I'm Gwen. Nice to meet you. She shook my hand with a strong grip. It was a normal handshake, but I wasn't going to relax just yet. I needed to give a few minutes to get to know exactly what these new residents were. Oh, come in. I'll introduce you to my family. I slowly followed her into the apartment. I looked around. It seemed pretty normal. Then again, all the apartments seem normal. It's the things that live inside of them that aren't normal. Hey guys, come out here, Gwen called into the apartment. Would you like some water? She asked. Oh, no thank you, I replied. I turned to the sounds of footsteps to see two children and another woman walking into the kitchen. This is my wife Laura and our kids Kimberly and Christopher. Nice to meet you. Laura stuck her hand out and I shook it. Again, it was normal. I'm Eric. I'm the older owner of the building, I replied. Nice to meet you. There was a brief moment of awkward silence. So, do you have any questions? I asked. The kids took off as I stood there with Gwen and Laura. Oh, yeah, so what are the rules? Are we allowed to, paint the walls and hang stuff up? Gwen asked. Oh, yeah, you can decorate this place however you want, I replied. Awesome, she exclaimed. So, if you don't mind me asking, what are you? I asked, fidgeting with my hands. Excuse me? Laura asked. What are you? I don't mean to be offensive or anything. I would just like to know. Laura and Gwen exchanged looks. Like lesbians? Are you allowed to ask that? Gwen asked, narrowing her eyebrows. No! I mean, what are you? I know you're not human. Laura laughed. Not human? What do you think we are, like mythical creatures? Well, I don't know. That's why I'm asking. I mean, your neighbors are Wendigos, and there's a family of Kukuis down the hall. I pointed out the door. Is this some kind of joke? Is this because we're new? Gwen asked. No, I replied, confused. Well, then we're just regular humans. Laura chuckled awkwardly. I stared at them. Haven't you ever seen a human before? Not a regular one. At least, not in this building. Okay, now you're freaking me out, Gwen said. Do you not know where you are? I asked. Well, sure. We're in Colorado, right? Laura asked. No, this isn't Colorado. What do you mean? Where are we then? Point Pine, I replied. Where? Gwen asked. You're in Point Pine. It's a small town in the middle of nowhere. Laura ran to the window in the living room and pulled the curtains back and gasped. "What is this?" Gwen asked, turning around. Their window had a view of some buildings in the down below, along with a giant sign right outside. "Welcome to Point Pine. Population unknown." I don't understand." "Yeah, me neither." "How did we get here?" Gwen asked. I shrugged. "I don't really know how people get here. They just show up." "Okay, then how do we get to Colorado?" Laura asked, backing away from the window. "You don't," I replied. "What do you mean?" "You can't willingly leave Point Pine once you're here. Everyone who leaves gets banished. And even then, when you die out there, you just wake up here, and you're stuck again," I replied. Gwen sighed, and Laura ran her hands through her black hair. "So, you don't know why we're here?" Laura asked, and I shook my head. "But if you really are just human, then this can't be good." After a few minutes of silence, I left the apartment and decided to go outside to get some fresh air. I stepped onto the elevator and pressed the floor for the button for the first floor. I got off and made my way down the doors, stopping as I reached out to open it. I looked down at the watch on my wrist. It was still noon. But that wasn't possible. I had been up in the apartment for at least 20 minutes. But that wasn't the only thing that was wrong. It was pitch black outside. I couldn't even see the sidewalk right outside the door or the giant tree that was a few feet in front of the building. I pressed my forehead against the glass, squinting to see if I could make something out in the darkness. Suddenly, someone crashed into the glass, causing me to jump back at least a few feet in fright. "Holy shit!" I gasped. "Hey, open the door!" I walked closer and realized that I recognized the person who was outside. It was Lee. Everyone knew Lee. Everyone knew who he was, since he had lost his eye in the Point Pine parade years ago. "Lee?" I asked. "Open the door!" I had heard that he had gotten his eye back from the farmer's market, and now that I was seeing him, I could see that it was true. I reached out to open the door, but it was stuck. I tried again, pulling on the door as hard as I could, but it didn't budge. "It's stuck," I said. Suddenly, Lee went flying backwards, and I watched, and the darkness lifted up, and the sun came out again. I looked down at my watch again. Still noon. When I looked back up, I found myself standing in the hallway on the 6th floor again, as apartment number 68 appeared in front of me again. I reached out and knocked. "Coming!" someone called from inside. Footsteps approached, and then the door opened up in front of me. "Hi!" "Gwen?" I asked. "Yeah. Who are you?" she asked. Eric. We just spoke," I said. "I'm sorry. You must have me confused for somebody else." I didn't reply, staring into the apartment as Laura and the kids came out. That was at least an hour ago. But then the same chain of events keeps repeating every few minutes, and the time has not moved past noon. I don't know how to undo it. I don't even know what it is. I'm pretty sure I know what's causing it, though. Humans shouldn't live in Point Pine Oaks.